Hello everyone and welcome to the second week of our Teaching with GIS series. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy Term 4 schedules to attend today's webinar. I'm sure that your time is very precious, so I really do appreciate it today. I can see a few familiar names in the attendees list from those that attended last week's webinar, but for those that don't know me, my name is Jake Lovejoy and I'm the Education Program Manager at Esri Australia and your host for today's webinar. Joining me for the webinar today are two teachers from Tintern Grammar in Victoria, Head of Geography Naomi Baulch and Geography teaching colleague Rebecca Infanti will be sharing on their experience with the recent adoption of geospatial technology into their schooling curriculum. Before we get started, I do want to let you know that we are recording today's webinar and it'll be made available later this week to you via email and on our website. Throughout the webinar presentation, we welcome your questions. Please submit them in the GoToWebinar panel on the right-hand side of your screen at any time. And at the end of the presentation, we'll have some time to go through them and answer a lot of them. As previously mentioned, for today, we are joined by two of Tintern Grammar's teachers, Rebecca Infanti and Naomi Baulch, who will present, or team teach if you will, on how Tintern has recently introduced ArcGIS into the school's curriculum and assessment, particularly with the subject of geography. They'll also share on the successes and the challenges they've faced or are currently facing with the adoption of ArcGIS into the classroom. By way of a brief background, Rebecca teaches psychology and junior geography at Tintern Grammar, which has followed established careers in both advanced and precision manufacturing, as well as psychology. Naomi has 20 years of experience as a teacher and currently teaches senior geography and senior biology. Naomi has also worked as a curriculum developer with various government departments and has authored several science textbooks and academic articles concerning the role of fieldwork in geography. In this team teaching approach, Rebecca and Naomi will co-present on Tintern Grammar's ArcGIS journey so far. Rebecca will share largely around Year 7, 8 and the junior school and how they've been exposed to GIS in the classroom, whereas Naomi will be sharing about the direction Tintern Grammar is beginning to take in introducing GIS to senior curriculum and assessment. Although I'm sure, like all good teachers, they'll probably jump in and bounce off each other anyway. Rebecca, I know I'm excited to hear more about this, so I'm going to go and pass control over to you.
Great.
Now.
Thank you, Jake. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our presentation. I wanted to start by letting you know that ArcGIS is a bit of a new journey for us. In fact, working with GIS with students is a bit of a learning platform, and in so many ways we are running with it and enjoying the excitement that the students have. They have an aptitude for this that we could have never have predicted, I don't think. They just love it. And like I'm working with my Year 7 classes today on the Map It competition, which is run on the ArcGIS platform, and those kids are just like sponges. They cannot get enough of it and they understand how it works, and it's amazing to see how quickly they can come up with new ideas. So it's very exciting, and we do love that enthusiasm and that excitement that comes in the classroom. I have to say that I think you can see, courtesy of Mr. Lunig, the little cartoon on the screen at the moment, that we sort of feel we're very early on in this journey and that it feels good at the moment. I know there'll probably be some pitfalls and a few more strenuous times that we say, oh, we need to know more, we want to know more, we have to do more. And those will be learning experiences. And I think this is really only the second year we've been applying the GIS platform in our assessments, and so I would say that we're doing a better job this year than last year, but it's still very much, we have a long way to go with it. So geography at Tintern, just to give you a quick heads up, like most schools, we have an intensive geography history rotated subject across the year. So one semester of geography and one semester of history. We assume that students have had limited exposure to geography and other parts or other than in parts of an integrated curriculum in junior school. So it's not something that we expect them to come with a lot of prior knowledge. But we enjoy this excitement of a blank slate or an open canvas where they can just start to learn about the wonders of geography. We immerse them in that world and introduce them to the geographical concepts to start with, and inquiry and skills that some of them have never even heard of before. I think what's exciting about that is that it's the beginning of a journey that we plan to just keep building on, like a building block, so that we have some amazing structures in place towards the end of their education at Tintern. And so each year we extend that knowledge and that application of the ArcGIS platform, and by the time they get to Naomi and year 10 and year 11 and 12, they are very, very skilled and will be able to apply these things in ways that we've never even predicted. So this is a little bit of an outline very quickly on our curriculum that we follow. We use the Australian curriculum, and in particular, the parts that are in blue on this screen, I guess, talk about where we try and integrate the ArcGIS or some kind of online GIS skill development. In particular, we start off with Year 7 mapping and geospatial skills, and we assume that there's been, for many of them, no exposure to the gold mines that maps can hold. Obviously, GIS systems, in particular like ArcGIS, are a metaphorical gold mine where these students just look at it and go, oh, but that's just a map of the world. Oh, no, 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 it's not. There's so much more if you know where to look. One of the most popular tasks that our kids love with this platform in particular is in year 8. You can see the landscapes and landforms unit that we do. And we have a design your own refuge, zombie refuge platform there. Sorry, there's a bit of background noise that will be gone in a moment. And this is fantastic because they come into this task with not a lot of experience, having done some year 7 work, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. But their job here is to find somewhere, anywhere on Earth, that it would be a suitable location to house about 50 people from a zombie apocalypse. Of course, they love the idea of that. And so this involves them finding some form of accommodation that's in some potentially has some kind of perimeter boundary. So that, again, they're just playing with the mapping software, looking at the data that it holds. The requirements that they have include looking for things like they have to be 500 meters within a freshwater source. They have to have space and suitable, a location that's able to have multiple forms of transport available to them, a perimeter boundary to protect them from zombie attacks, a medical unit of some kind, and an area of farming. So either sort of natural land or uncleared land, or potentially fields where they can grow some form of agriculture to provide food for the people that they're housing. So using the platform, they then create a map. They find their location and they create a map, and they map out where each of those components are on that map. And they use a variety of tools and I guess components of the software to be able to demonstrate the characteristics required. They also have to write and justify why they've picked the locations that they have, and that's fascinating to hear some of their stories of why they liked the look of Buckingham Palace, or why they thought another location out in Central Africa might have been a good idea. So yeah, it's a really interesting activity, that one in Year 8. In Year 9, we have an outdoor education program where our students spend at least 4 weeks of their year on site at, or their education, 4 weeks of their education out doing remote hiking or doing some kind of activity that challenges them. It's called the Challenge Program. And we enjoy incorporating that into our geography subject, and we do things like do cross sections and map the path or the hike that they're going to do. We also have the biomes and food security content, which is a great way of looking at threats to food security and productivity, and talking about why some different components or countries or factors influence those things. So that's fascinating. And my favourite part of the Year 9 course is the interconnecting world component, where we look at case studies of Gaza, Somalian piracy and the Suez Canal, and talk about how a variety of economic, political, social, environmental, all sorts of factors relate to these case studies. It's absolutely fascinating and amazing what the kids can find when they know where to look. Year 10, we move into our geographies of wellbeing, environmental change and management, and we have a very large fieldwork component, which we have won an award for, which was fantastic just these last couple of years, where we go to Phillip Island to look at coastal processes and environmental change management. And there's an amazing set of data that's accessible through a variety of platforms there as well. Okay, so I'm going to talk now a little bit about the junior secondary assessments that we try to integrate. So there's 2 tasks that we like to do in Year 7 geography, and both of those involve use of the ArcGIS platform. Unfortunately, our favourite one is the Map It competition, which is being set up by the Geography Teachers Association of Victoria in conjunction with originally Plan Melbourne and a variety of local governments. But it only runs in one of the semesters. It runs in semester 2 each year. So we had to figure out a way of exposing and introducing similar concepts to our semester 1 classes, but at the same time allowing them to be, I guess, excited and engaged with the information and the ArcGIS platform in a variety of ways. So we have incorporated and are planning to incorporate a story mapping component in our semester 1 course next year. Due to the beauty of COVID, which might I say, you guys are kind of, we've just come out of lockdown down here in Victoria, so in Melbourne, so it's an exciting day for us yesterday. But due to COVID this year, a lot of our students were in remote learning. In fact, the majority of them were. And so we were unable to incorporate the ArcGIS platform into our assessment this year because our license is licensed for use on site only. So,
and for those of you playing along at home, it's Naomi speaking. We've only had the Year 7s back on campus for about 2 weeks at the moment. Prior to that, they spent all of term 3 and 7 weeks out of the 10 weeks of term 2 at learning from home. So the Year 8s came back Monday of this week and the Year 9s came back Monday of this week. So this is sort of us putting our feet back into the wading pool as well at this point of the year with the kids and where we're going with this.
Yeah, thanks, Naomi. It's certainly been a challenging year for everybody all over the world, but I think For Melbourne students, I certainly, and for teachers as well, we've had to be very innovative in the way we present information to students, and it's something that I guess, pretty chuffed to be able to say that I think we've done very well with our students. They certainly seem to have enjoyed and come out of this process with as many skills and engagement in the content. And I think that's evident in the way that the kids are engaging, even with this competition at the moment, the group in Year 7, even just this week. Anyway, I'll talk about both of these assessments a little bit more and give you some examples of how we integrate them. For some of you who have never used story maps before, there's a link in the PowerPoint here, which maybe Jake might be able to pop in the chat or something for you, or you could search it up. It's a great little resource, the place where I started when I thought, all right, I want to do this and I want to do it well. So the example that I'm presenting for you today is actually an adaptation of a student's work earlier this year that was done on a PowerPoint that I've incorporated into a story map because of the fact that we weren't able to use the software. But it demonstrates how it can be applied and certainly where we'll be going in the years to come. So this assessment is a story map investigating the livability factors of 3 cities on 3 different continents. So they're required to have a mapping component where time zone change, distance travelled for each leg, relative and absolute locations, etc. are presented. And then they also talk about the livability aspect of those 3 cities that they're going to visit. And it uses layers in the data and in their research to illustrate factors of livability and interest that they get to pick those locations, which is great. So the learning outcomes that they are expected to demonstrate from this task includes, as you can see, required to undertake several mission steps in order to demonstrate an application of mapping skills, demonstrate knowledge and understanding of diverse cultures, demonstrate an understanding of weather and climate in a variety of countries, demonstrate familiarity and usage of online GIS resources, and they need to find 2 or 3, depending on how much work they're able to do in the time frame. 2 or 3 cities on different continents, compare the livability of those places and annotate photographic evidence. So it's quite an intensive task, but at the same time, the kids lap this up. They love the idea of going, oh, I can go anywhere on Earth as long as it's on a different continent. Where will I go? What will I see? What would I find? There's this sort of journey into the unknown that we love about this task. So here's the instructions that they are given. Oftentimes we start off with using an atlas or some kind of hard copy map where they can conceptualize the world on a piece of paper and look, okay, I can see that I need to travel west or I need to travel east, depending on where they're going. To get to that location, and then we give them the online platform that allows that to translate into, okay, I understand now that that the world isn't actually a flat piece of paper. It's a globe, and we need to be able to understand how that works. Step 2, so they decide on their locations, then they create a map that shows their journey. They need to map the solo flight. They need to label each city and country. They need to have a map consistent with Boltzmann and measure and label the distances of each leg of the trip. And any other interesting features that they might like in terms of like oceans, continents, the equator, Greenwich Meridian, etc. Then they need to find the livability factors that we were talking about in those learning outcomes. So we want them to find 2 photos per city to illustrate the human features and 2 photos that illustrate the physical features of each city. They need to number each image, title, give it a title, annotate the photographs, make sure they're having borders. Presentation is everything in junior geography, and for a lot of kids that is a big step. Okay, so here's my example of this, and I'm going to just jump across to another screen now and show you the one that I created on behalf of one of our students who this was the journey that he decided he would like to do. So this is the ArcGIS map race around the world that I created on behalf of this young man. And if I get my mouse over here, you can see here that we have our Mercator projection, and we talk about different projections and so on, and how the shapes of countries aren't always, they don't always look like this. We've also got different layers on our map. So if I go to the content page here, you can see that I've got map notes, which is what makes up my legend. And then I've got a layer that I've added, which is world time zones. So this is the time zones that are presented, and you can see down here that even numbers are in white and odd numbers for a change in zone are in grey. And you can also see, it might be a little bit difficult for you to see, but there's numbers, white numbers on here, which represent the difference in time zone in relation from the Greenwich Meridian. Okay, so for this young man, he decided he would start in Melbourne, obviously, which is where we are. So we anchored him here. And leg 1 was his flight to Tokyo, Melbourne to Tokyo. So he needed to give a flight distance, flight time in hours, total travel time, and talk about how there's a change in time zones. And there's the website that he could get that information from. And then he can talk a little bit. He actually wanted to go to this city, which I'm not sure of the pronunciation. I think is Higashirakugo, Higashirakugo in Japan. So yeah, a very interesting choice. I thought that he'd chosen somewhere that was quite not your typical holiday destination that I would expect maybe some kids to pick. Leg 2 of his journey was from Tokyo, or the nearest major airport, Tokyo to New York. So interesting that his second destination was a little bit more of a typical destination. And without making any stops, he was traveling so he could locate these distances and travel time, and that New York City is 13 hours behind Tokyo. Leg 3 of his trip was from New York to Bloemfontein. I don't know again if I've pronounced that correctly. My my pronunciation of foreign cities is probably not its best. And then flight details and information about that. And you can see here that there's this, okay, you've actually lost 3 hours in your flight path here. And it's interesting for them to see that represented on mapping software and as well visually. And then of course, returning back home. So from South Africa back to into Melbourne, and Melbourne being 9 hours ahead. So there's our basic map representation of the trip. And I'm about to take us to the story map component of this. So this will be where we head, and I have integrated his PowerPoint that he created whilst we were in remote learning into this story map. So this is part of the story mapping software that ArcGIS offer. It's a great way to get students engaged and tell a story from maps. So these are my students' words: my journey to 3 cities on 3 different continents to explore factors that affect their livability, such as culture and climate. a cover image. And then if we click down here or scroll, no, can't. Oh, there we go, wrong way on my mouse. We have the map showing where his locations are and his distances. So this is just a generic image, and this is the link to the original map that I just created and showed you. So we're starting off in Melbourne. You can insert an image of Melbourne in there. And then his first destination is Higashirakugo in Japan. This is the first leg of my trip. I would like to go to Japan at the end of autumn because of the cherry blossoming, and it's a lovely place to be. Might I also just mention that this student is an EAL student, so not a native English speaking student. So it's interesting to see. You might see a few spelling errors in here as well, because I've just copied and pasted his text into here. Talking about built environment. So this is where he has now started to integrate pictures and annotated them, explaining the benefits or the notable features that they include. Again, this is the natural environment. Oh, that's moving on to the next destination, and some annotations that accompanying those. Then we moved on to destination 2, which was New York, with our cover photo and his photographs with annotations here. Actually, sorry, Jake, I'm jumping around a little bit, and I apologize, everyone. I know that's very frustrating to do as a viewer. I just wanted to point out that you can actually have multiple images here. So you can scroll through images that are inserted and put information in, like currency, language, so on and so forth. You can click on these and zoom into them, which, if you're presenting to the class, provides a great opportunity for the students to be able to show what they're capable of. A little bit of historical information, and then back to our photo again. So yeah, there's some great features that you can incorporate into this. These are just single image ones. Then we're moving on to New York. I've got a couple of images here for you. So he's covered his similar factors here, talking about how some of the human features and history, and then photographic evidence, which he was asked to provide. The skyline of New York, sorry, it's a bit hard to just figure out where that needs to be. Talking about some of the features of the human skyline. And then moving on to our third destination, which was South Africa. And I've got some other slides that he's provided in there as well. So it's a great platform to be able to let the students have control of the information that they're providing, and at the same time bringing them up to speed on an amazing resource and all the evidence that could be included with it. I haven't actually integrated much in terms of the ArcGIS mapping component here, except for that map at the beginning, but you'll see from the next assessment task that I'm going to provide to you that the map, which is the map it task, it's amazing the amount of detail that you can incorporate into these stories. And his last slide, which is, well, where would he actually like to live out of these places? And it's quite fascinating for him, fascinating that he picked New York, although then his interest had a very interesting representation of the fact that we've talked about schools and access to education and services, but then the downsides were pollution. So that's one example of how you could integrate story mapping and ArcGIS mapping into your assessments. In Year 7, Let me just go back now to my PowerPoint for you. Okay, so there's the story map. Okay, so this is the Map It competition, which is the second of our 2 assessments that we use at Year 7. There's a link here to the Map It competition, which I'll show you, and also a video a little bit providing you with some information if you're curious to see what's involved with it. So the steps we use to complete this competition and assessment include it's a process that engages the student and helps them to understand the value of their contribution in urban planning and livability. So we introduce the task and talk about its completion. So it was the first year it was run last year, and we were lucky enough to have the state champion for the competition as one of our students. And so I talk about that and say, no pressure, but come on guys, you gotta keep carrying the flag. And we talk about the concept of why and how this plays an important part of community consultation for local, state and federal planning, urbanisation and livability, and managing projected population growth as well. So there's a lot of stimulus there that can be incorporated into the livability unit. We talk about demographics and what demographics are. Some of the students have no idea. In fact, most of them have no idea what a demographic is. And how we can access data from a variety of platforms. So here's another great website called the Profile ID website, which in Melbourne provides a list of all, in fact, it's national, I think. I can see Adelaide there, and Albury and Adelaide Plains. So all the local government areas data in terms of population, demographics, jobs, income, it's all drawn from our annual, no, how often do we have data collected, Naomi, with our census? I think it's, what is it, every 6 years? I can't remember, sorry. Anyway, it's census data driven. So we compare the data and look at how that data could be presented in different ways. And then the Map It stimulus, which is a joint project by Esri and GTAV, the Geography Teachers Association, is an example. So you can see on there that on the top right it says a story map. So this is their example of a story map and getting the students to engage and incorporate data and understand data. It's a fantastic opportunity for them. So basically we start with, this is how we would typically complete this task. We give them the rubric, which is driven by the competition. It's a statewide competition, and say, guys, you want to be heading for the left-hand column here, the 3-pointer column. You want to be providing comprehensive descriptions of your neighbourhood activity centre, which is one of the terms that they use in the stimulus. You want to understand the terms that are presented and the data that's presented. You need to interpret the data and then analyse the needs in terms of livability. And then you need to be able to present your recommendations in terms of livability on an ArcGIS map. So they're creating their own map, but also using the ArcGIS platform to incorporate and understand it. So one of the hurdles that I think we've struggled with on this is that it's quite difficult for students to be able to click on an iPad because there's no mouse. The ArcGIS platform works extremely well when you can left click and right click, and you really need a mouse to be able to do this. So we're fortunate enough to have some PC labs here at the school that provide the opportunity for students to be able to do this. And we explore, they play with this, they play with the platform and they play with the data that it's presenting. And it helps them to understand what they're looking at. It helps them to understand why they're looking at it, and it also helps them to demonstrate the learning outcomes which are expected of them. They then do some research and preparation. So the ArcGIS platform Storymap, which I'll show you in a moment, has about 12 different opportunities where student can draw data out about livability in Melbourne. And they
So Beck, maybe jump forward and zoom down to those slides now. So
okay,
down to 26, and you can sort of show it as you're talking through what it actually looks like and how you, because I came up and just said, hey Beck, do this. So, so if you want to jump down to 26 and show them what it actually looks like, that might.
Okay, so
yeah.
This is the map that they're producing at the end, and the written stimulus or justification that they're giving. But if I actually show you the platform, I go back to my other page here. So this is the Map It stimulus that GTAV and Esri have created, and it's a magnificent stimulus. So there's a welcome page talking about what an activity centre is, population density. This is where we start to drill into the data that the students can interpret. So we're looking at, here's Endeavour Hills, for example, one of our suburbs in Melbourne, and you can start to see a population density data coming up. Population under 15, over 65, the amount of, let's go back in again. Let's pick a different suburb this time, just for the for interest's sake. So this is population under 15, and you can see here that there's some different colours and data. So they learn that, okay, I need to find a legend somewhere here that allows me to understand what these colours or this choropleth map means. So there's a lot of stimulus here, and it takes them a fair bit of time to work through all 12 of those what we call stimulus features. And they take down some notes on that. Going back to, I realise I've got to keep an eye on the time. Going back to they take down some notes and then come up with recommendations for that. So it's an exciting opportunity for them to be consulted in relation to livability and to provide that feedback through the GIS platform. And then it's actually a competition that they then send off their entries to GTAV, and they're judged by Planning Melbourne in relation to the recommendations they're making. It's a very exciting project for them, and they love the idea that someone's actually hearing their voice and listening to them.
And the variety of things that the kids come up with is profound. We have children tackling urban issues that we never thought that they would have even been aware of in their local area, and they're limited to their local area. So it was listening to their stories when they'd finished and what they wanted to do. And they're sort of, the awesome thing about doing this with Year 7 is that they're unshackled. They haven't had society saying, well, this is the way we do stuff to them. They're still imaginative, and they've still got that boundless feeling that they can do what they like. So their ideas and their way of thinking is different. So it's actually been a really powerful tool for them to have a voice, and for us to see that, these kids are awesome.
And the software is pretty awesome too, if I might add.
Oh, I know, the whole thing, just the whole experience last year as an onlooker was just, it was great. And the kids, hearing them talk about it in the corridor, one of my other hats at work is that I'm the Year 8 coordinator, and so I'm out in the corridors a lot. So I hear the kids talking, and I'm telling them to get off their iPads at lunchtime, but they're also doing they were discussing this and talking about it and saying, oh, I want to do this next and I want to do this bit and that bit. Beck, it's 5:10, so we might skip year 8. Year 8, we do an assessment of landform hazards, and we're happy to sort of, anyone wants to hang at the end, we can chat, or you've got our email addresses, so we're more than happy to talk to you regarding that. So I'm sort of, going to get you to go through that last slide. Back one, that one.
Oh, this one?
That one. So do you want me to do that, or do you want?
Well, the only things that I wanted to say, I guess, in relation to this is whether or not you've got access to things like Storymaps depends on the subscription that you have to ArcGIS. So that might be something to bear in mind. iPads are not as easy as a PC or Mac to manage the content, which I've already said. Saving work, not so much an issue if you're using the platform, the ArcGIS platform, but the Mapit component particularly, you cannot save work. So the students need to be able to start and finish their work in the time that's allocated. And I think the most important part is that this is complex information. This is complex data. This is complex manipulation of multiple forms of information. So we have quite a few students here at Tintern that have learning disabilities, whether it be a processing issue or a verbal issue, information issue. And so they can find it challenging. So you need to be able to adjust the task up or down depending on the student's abilities, so that you can make sure that they still have a rich learning experience from it. Shall I keep control, Naomi, and just
Yes,
move
please.
through?
You just move on. Okay,
All right,
so that's me.
Yeah.
Okay, so at senior level, we count year 10 as part of our senior program, and we offer units 1 to 4 VCE geography. Currently, we've got about 40 kids across year 11 and coming in. So when we start transitioning, so next year we'll have about 40 kids doing year 11 and 12. The skills at junior level in geography, we specifically designed our program so that we are scaffolding them all the way through a progression towards the final 2 years, and I suppose even more so towards the year 12 assessments and what that might look like, feel like, smell like. We actually at year 8 take them out to Hanging Rock, and we do a very intensive fieldwork. We get them to write a fieldwork based on the VCE assessment criteria and writing styles and build them up. We don't necessarily expect the same level of analysis, but we're more about teaching them how to manipulate data and analyze data, which is where eventually we hope in our game plan for using ArcGIS and Storymaps, they'll learn to use that, and it'll be a bit more second nature by the time we get to senior classes. Across the 2 years of VCE geography, so sorry if I'm telling you how to suck eggs, I'm not sure how many people are from Victoria or who are teachers and who's from elsewhere, but we have 3 compulsory fieldwork reports across the 2 years of VCE, and also portfolio studies that they need to complete. So from 2022, because we've extended the study design, Year 12 is going to look a bit different. The fieldwork's actually going to account for 25% of their overall mark, just about. It's a bigger percentage of their marks. So we want to make sure that these kids know exactly what they're doing and how to use these things as they get there. So I don't anticipate that year 12 will be using ArcGIS because they haven't been taught the skills at the moment. The idea is that all year 11 fieldwork will be presented using Storymaps, and that we will be using, for our portfolio case studies, most definitely they can be using Storymaps. However, at year 12, because of the need for authentication and the need for me to, or whoever's teaching year 12, to be able to, I suppose, keep eyes on every single thing they do in the class during the write-up stage, it's going to be a bit hard to use story maps. We'll be able to use the ArcGIS platform and the manipulations of the layers on that, but it will need to then be integrated in to their final reports. So that's what we would like. So at the moment, we've sort of, last year was our first launch year of using ArcGIS at Year 7. So the Year 8s are a bit more proficient. The Year 7s are learning now. The Year 10s have had a, hey, look at this, isn't this cool, let's have a play. The Year 9s have not really had any exposure really at the moment. And the Year 11s I've spent, Year 11 came back to school in Victoria 2.5 weeks ago. So I've been working with the Year 11s, teaching them the program, but because of the way we are now sitting and having to do a virtual field work, we are not going to be able to go ahead where I wanted to go with it, unfortunately, because transition and, well, getting started for next year has changed dates and exams and things. So it's okay, we can use transition for them into next year to have a play. So the Year 11s of just what we were going to do with the Year 11s is, I don't know if any of you have seen the Top Gear Vietnam special, but Vietnam is one of their case studies for tourism and the impacts of tourism globally. So we use this as our Asian case study. So the idea is that they are going to follow the coastline from Ho Chi Minh to Hanoi and out to Ha Long Bay. So they'll stop at Nha Tran, Hue, and a few other places on the way, and learning about topography, climate, how they impact on tourism, how politics influences tourism, how Ha Long Bay, what's going on up there and what needs to happen to protect it, even though it is UNESCO listed. It's not really working well. So COVID has put the stops on a lot of things this year that we really wanted to do. So this task next year will be a story map, and they will be, the kids in Year 11 will have been trained up well and truly on how to use story maps and ArcGIS so that they can then do their one of their fieldworks that way. Next slide, Beck. So what did we learn? Similar to the juniors and the middle years, that it takes time because of the way our access to story maps and ArcGIS has evolved at school. We're trapped in currently we're trapped on use on site only. So we have to share labs with obviously ITC subjects and the junior classes and that sort of thing. And we also run a vet program through the school on computer programming and that sort of thing. So we are limited in our access to labs, unfortunately. So the kids can use, as Beck said, on campus, but not off campus because of that. Tight curriculum also limits it at Year 11 and 12, and it's a chock-a-block curriculum. And again, I also had the same issues with differentiation and then authentication, which I've touched on. But the kids, when they were learning it, were seeing applications and talking about, well, I could use this in history, or this is really good, I can use this to talk about this in health, and I could use this to present my PE or my outdoor ed. So the kids see the value of the program, and we're definitely on board with the value of the program and how we're going to be using
Absolutely.
it. But COVID got us this year, which is a real bummer, but we will prevail, and the plan is enacted. So basically, if you came, as Beck said, if you came back to us in 4 years' time and we did this again, it would be a totally different story. So we would have kids that have been scaffolded in their development. We would be having kids that have been using it for a while. So becoming a bit more second nature. I think you need to put the time in with the kids and let them explore and let them play before we can start expecting them to be doing this. And the other, I suppose, a point that I wanted to clarify on Beck's behalf is, if she has those students in semester 1 in Year 7 for geography, they might not then have geography until semester 2 in Year 8. So it's a full 12 months before they're exposed to geography again. So we do have to refresh. So we're sort of shackled a bit by our planning and the way our curriculum runs. So that is us. They are our direct email addresses. Please feel free to contact us. And I suppose, Jake, if you want to open up to questions.
Awesome. First of all, thanks, Rebecca and Naomi. It was awesome. It is. I've been talking to you guys all week. It's super valuable to hear where Tintern grammar is, because I think it puts things into perspective for schools that are, particularly schools that are starting out. And it's good to know that there is there's a point where everyone has to start, and the end result, like you were just mentioning, 4 years time, it's going to be a completely different story. But the fact is, you got to start somewhere and you got to put the effort in somewhere. So I think it's been really valuable from that perspective. We have had a couple of questions come through, but before we get started on them, just letting you know that you can still submit your questions via the GoToWebinar question box, as seen on the screen right now. So feel free to do that. Otherwise, I'll start asking some questions.
Sure.
So the first one came through right at the beginning from Julie. I think, Rebecca, it was when you were talking about your junior units. So with the junior
Yes.
units, can these assignments be done on iPads as our students have iPads up to year 9?
Sure.
Would you like to answer that?
Yes, they can. It just requires a different skill set to be able to access the data via the iPad, and I know that our kids in junior levels have a lot of trouble if they are on their iPads. It can chew the battery a lot, so
Yeah,
which is
it is a data hungry program, and it does actually go through a lot of the iPad power. And also we have, as Beck said, we do specialize somewhat in working with children with varying challenges to their learning. So a lot of the, well, I don't mean a lot, I mean, but we do have several students that find the tactile nature of needing to manipulate things on the iPad really difficult. So often if they lean in the wrong spot, they can lose data and that sort of thing. So we found it a lot easier to go with the lab program and work that way. But it's not impossible to do. It's practice, and it's getting the kids to practice using their fingertips rather than leaning their hand on the side of it. I don't know if you've ever tried tracing maps on an iPad and the thing zooms across one side and then it zooms back and it enlarges and it smalls. So the kids really need to be able to work sort of almost virtually on top of what they're doing with their fingertips rather than leaning on the side of their hand. So I suppose it's learning a bit of a different version of dexterity.
Yeah, and I'll add my 2 cents worth in to that question. Especially when dealing with story maps, the story maps application does require the screen to be a certain size, and I'm fairly sure last time I checked that iPads and iPhones were too small a screen to build or design a story map on. You can view one on it, the finished product, but you can't build a story map on an iPad or an iPhone.
okay.
So yeah, my encouragement would definitely be to be using laptops for story maps and ArcGIS Online. iPads and iPhones can be useful, or smartphones, sorry, can be useful in the field if you're using some of the field apps like Survey 123. The next
Thank
question, no worries. Next question was about you use the license only on site at Tintern Grammar. Is there a reason why?
Yes, there is. So initially we found out about using ArcGIS at a geography teachers conference, and it was your predecessor Sky spoke about it, and we're like, oh, this sounds cool, let's get on board. And we applied for the site licenses, and it turned out that Tintern had already got some, and we were like, oh, that's good, who got some? And it took us about 18 months to actually find out who had got the site licenses. So the site licenses we're using are slightly different ones, I believe. They're not necessarily educational ones. There was something that they came through our development office because they were mapping our catchment areas and bus routes and all sorts of things. So we have to use them on site. I'm not sure. Our head of IT is the person that she looks after all of this tricky stuff for us, and then we just use the software. So I believe it has something to do with, she does magic, and I
Yes.
believe that it has something to do with the way it was set up initially as to how we can use them on site.
Yeah,
But it also
I might
helps that, yeah, if you could look at that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I might have a look. But also to answer the question, anyone on a normal, I guess, school's license, you have the students have the capability to access it all at
Yeah,
home,
definitely.
providing they have their own laptop or whatnot to access it on. A question about the GTAV Map It competition from a Queensland school teacher, I'm guessing. And I will probably answer this on behalf of GTAV. Can teachers in Queensland get their students to participate in the Map It competition if it is hosted? I know that there are a couple of GTAV colleagues in here, so if you do send a text through, I'll see it. My advice would be that it's a competition open to Victorian students and Victorian schools at this stage, as there are some government departments involved that are involved in the judging and awards process. So I think that it's definitely a resource you can access in the class as a bit of a stimulus piece, and you can apply that stimulus to the state of Victoria. You have a follow-up question saying, does GTAQ have a similar competition? To my knowledge, they don't. That might be a good avenue to pursue. Katrina, put the pressure on them.
Off you go, Jake.
And I was I don't want to build it, but I'm happy to put the pressure on. And speaking of Mapper, it'll be available all year this year. I think it finishes towards the end of the term, and of course it'll be available next year. So it's a competition that's run yearly. So if you are a Victorian teacher, feel free to jump on and have a look, especially for that place and livability unit. Another question from Matt. In your experience, are there ways to incorporate smaller GIS tasks into normal geography lessons rather than the big project?
Absolutely.
So that was one of the things that I wanted to show on the Year 8 stuff, and I didn't have time to do it. And maybe if I quickly jump back and just show you the slides, we get students to build maps such as this one here. So this is for Year 8s.
Well, hold on. I'll just need to let you share your screen. That's all right.
Yep. Forgot about that. Year 8 landforms and hazards. So this is using the ArcGIS platform with its layers. And if I go back one slide, you can see the 3 layers that I've added to this map: tectonic plate boundaries, which is the pink line, recent earthquake events by magnitude, and recent earthquake events by shake intensity. This is just a plethora of information that the kids go, oh my gosh, look, there's a ring, talking about the ring of fire. Then we oh my gosh, look, they're all on the pink lines. Why would that be? Well, we've talked about tectonic plates and we've talked about movements, remember? Okay, so what is that saying? Oh, okay, so now there's the evidence that says this is what's happening. We can get them to create a map, including the legends, making sure it's all Boltzmann compliant. And then, so here's my print, and I've given it a title here: Map of recent earthquake activity and tectonic plates. And then they get this, it's got my name down, and so I did this one personally, but the students would have their name down there. There's the data that they can look at, and then you can apply an analysis activity. So we would use things like, we're a cultures of thinking school, so we use things like the mapping time traveler. So write a sentence explaining about what you know about this map now. Write a sentence about what you think this map would look like 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, and what will it look like in 100 years from now. So there's an analysis and an interpretation and the thinking routine that can evolve from that. And that's a 30-minute activity. So yes, absolutely.
And whilst we're doing that, we're also
Yeah, go for it.
sort of working with them on the whole concept of the PQEs and how do you describe patterns. And so we talk about linear, clustered, uneven. All of those things are just becoming part of the vernacular as we're developing them towards the
Yeah.
next assessment, the next thing. Yeah.
All right, awesome. Thanks for that. There are a couple of, Matt says thanks too. There are a couple of questions that I might address. So the first one was, where was it? Oh, with regards to the Map-It competition, one of the Map-It, the GTAV employees has gotten back through the questions and mentioned that if you're a Queensland school, you're more than welcome to submit student entries. So it's completely open to you. I guess you're just working in the Victorian space rather than the Queensland space, because all of the data is essentially in the state of Victoria. A question from David. Are you aware of ArcGIS being used by junior schools, specifically Year 6 students? There are a couple of primary school. Well, actually, you guys are prep through to 12, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys use it in
I have
Year
no
6?
oversight.
No.
So the way our school's set up, we've got ELC, and so the early learning centres down one end of the school, and then about 400 metres up the school property, we've got the junior schools side by side. So the boys and the girls are side by side there, and they run their own programs. So if they choose to use it, we'd go down and help them out. But so far, there's not been anything there. So and then
Yep.
Absolutely no reason why that couldn't happen though.
no, and I see a little sort of thing happening. I have
There
plans
are
now.
there are definitely primary schools, David, on the school's subscription. I'm not too aware of what they're doing with it, but I'm more than happy to chat further with you if you did want to reach out. And my email will be on a later slide as well. And I'm more than happy to chat that through a little bit with you.
And even, sorry, Jake,
Yep.
I was just going to say it could just be a stimulus point where you show that information on the screen and get students talking about ideas. There's absolutely, and concepts that they've never seen before. There's absolutely no reason why that couldn't happen.
Yep. Okay, I am very conscious of time and we've gone a couple minutes over, so I'll just begin to wrap up. There are a couple of questions we didn't address, and I'll make sure I take note of them. But if you are one of those people that didn't get your questions answered, more than happy to answer it, or perhaps Rebecca or Naomi is. Their emails are currently on the screen too, so feel free to email them as well. Otherwise, my email address is education@esriaustralia.com.au. and I'd be more than happy to help. Just really quickly in wrapping up, I'd like to mention that our final installment of this Teaching with GIS webinar is occurring next Thursday on the 5th of November at the same time as today, and you can visit that. You can register, via our professional development webpage, which is the URL down the bottom, and that'll also be the same webpage where the recordings are hosted too. You might be able to hear my cat scratching in the background. How good's working from home? In this final installment, we are super fortunate to be able to welcome Esri US Education Manager and Geographer Joseph Kursky. I'm sure the name is familiar to many of you, and he'll be presenting on how we as educators can empower and enable our students to become community change agents with the use of GIS. I've had some small interactions with Joseph in my short time at Esri Australia, and he's absolutely awesome. He's super enthusiastic, and he just loves seeing how schools are using GIS and loves suggesting how schools can use it a little bit more too. So I'm likely to learn just as much as you if you do attend. So I do encourage that. Otherwise, that's it from us today. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the next Teaching with GIS webinar.
Thank you, everyone.